Hey Ryan, I think it's a good time to start now. I'd just like to first say good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final installment of SUCE's very own graduate series, designed to help students with industry-related questions while granting you opportunities to learn more about the workforce. Today, we introduce 3 SUCE alumni who have entered the industry after graduating and leaving their time at SUCE behind. We host Patrick Ditchfield, a Senior Design Manager at Sydney Metro and former SUCE Secretary in 2010 and Vice President 2011. In addition, we have Guys Raffen, a Principal Civil Engineer in Urban Development at ACOM, former SUCE Vice President in 2008. And lastly, we have Joshua Beschak, a Structural Engineer at Arup, former SUCE Junior Vice President at 2016. Welcome all.
Good to be here.
So I think we're going to jump straight into questions. Just to get to know a little more about you guys and a little introduction to who you are. Could you introduce yourself a little bit and explain your past position and role at SUCE? Did you want to start that off, Josh?
Yeah, happy to. So if I took a flight back to the past, the reason I joined SUCE was at the time I started uni, which was 2015. A lot of my friends who I knew from outside of uni actually came into SUA and SUAB, and there was a group of us that were sort of all involved in all the different societies, and me doing civil, sort of was encouraged by my peers to run into SUCE and go for a position there, and luckily I was voted junior vice president, and so I think that was the initial thing that made me join SUCE, was just the community and how all the other engineering students, we all sort of were interacting with each other through these different societies. So I wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah, 100%. That's a big part why I joined, just because it's a huge community around SUCE as well. Moving on to you, Patrick. Did you want to answer that?
Yeah. So when I was back at uni, I started as the secretary of SUCE in my second year, and then the following year I was the vice president and president in my fourth year. I wanted to get involved with SUCE. I mean, I think it's why a lot of people do it, but the community and the group of people you meet is great fun at uni, but it's important to to build a network and to know the other people that you're going through uni with, because all those people will eventually be working in industry, so you'll have the right contacts.
Network's such a big important part now that I've understood as well. Moving on to you guys.
Look, to be honest, I joined because at the time it was a much smaller group, a much smaller community. We just wanted something that we had a little bit more maybe control and responsiveness over than things like SUA or even societies that were part of the greater university. So it was something that was smaller and that was very much us. We thought that if we made a strong enough case for it, that people would join us and that we could have events that would engage people in the engineering community. We were lucky that we were able to do that. And for us, the real reason was doing something that we had a little bit more control over.
Well, you've seen how much it's grown now since.
It's amazing. It's excellent. Yeah.
So what were the best memories that you all had in SUCE? Were there any particular events or kind of experiences you guys had? Maybe go in the same order, Josh?
Yeah, thinking back to SUCE, definitely the camps. I don't know if you guys still do Weber's camps. I don't know if you guys did those with Richard Weber. Yeah, and SUCE ran those camps. So I think, because I went to like 4 different camps, like one as a student, and then 3 as a tutor and a member of SUCE. I think they were definitely the things I remember the most, like just being able, like we had barbecues running, events, and just campfire. So yeah, definitely remember those nights.
Yeah, those are obviously very fun. Moving on to you, Patrick.
Unfortunately, Josh has stolen the words out of my mouth. The construction and surveying camps at Webbs Creek are definitely a big highlight. Similar to Josh, I went to 3 of them because I was involved for 3 years with SUCE. And yeah, it's great to be able to put some of those practical skills when you spend so much time sitting in, in lecture theatres or in tute rooms, learning stuff on paper, and to put them into practice, doing, closed loops or surveying exercises is a lot of fun. And then the social activities afterwards, a barbecue and a drink is with a group of friends and colleagues or friends and students is great fun.
What about you guys?
Yeah, for us, well, the main thing that sort of sticks out is we had a couple of cases where we really tried to branch out and have coordinate events with other parts of the university. Those events were all pretty successful. Those were probably the main ones that sort of reached critical mass. And that was great, seeing folks that may not necessarily be engineers. I mean, Sydney University has changed a lot since I was there, but certainly, at the time that I was there, engineering was kind of off, to the side a little bit, and engaging with the rest of the campus was great. And the fact that we were able to do that through SUCE was amazing.
Yeah. Now, so that's been the past. We can jump forward into the present timeline. You guys all now have experienced outstanding achievements and success in your career. From this time when you were in SUCE, how do you think your involvement in SUCE helped you in your career? Like, did you network with many people that gave you opportunities, or did you gain lifelong friends, form connections with people from industry, or even form critical skills that helped you throughout your careers?
Yeah, just definitely think the people that were involved with SUCE in the time I was involved in SUCE, all of them are now working in industry. So my first internship was through one of the presidents that graduated when I was the junior vice president, and then I managed to get an internship with him. So definitely SUCE helped me get my foot through the door at a few places. And even now, like you'll be surprised, like when you meet someone, it might be in a client meeting with another consultancy, and they also went to Sydney Uni, and then SUCE gets brought up and people still talk about it. So yeah, it's definitely a good thing to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to you, Patrick.
Yeah, echo, the network that you make is very important, but I think also the sort of the desire and enjoyment of lifelong learning is started off in SUCE with getting in industry partners to sort of present to us as students and some of the interesting things they were doing. And it's to stay relevant and to stay up to date, you've got to keep learning. The world changes so quickly around us. So that sort of that lifelong commitment to learning, I guess, started at university and SUCE for me.
Right. Now, guys, you had anything to add on?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing for me is that the people that were sort of at SUCE and at SUA at the time, I see those people all the time. There's folks that work at ACOM here that are I probably haven't seen for about 7 years or so that are walking the floor that I remember from those times. So
oh wow,
yeah, you never forget a face, and a lot of there's still a lot of folks you remember. So it's even if it's not immediate, it's certainly a longer term network that you build across the city.
Yeah, well, it seems like the common theme is networking, the amount of people you meet at SUCE, which was also a major reason why I joined as well. But so moving away from SUCE itself and into your personal experience, you all work in different unique types of industries. So I first want to start off with you, Patrick. You're working with the Sydney Metro as a senior design manager. So over the last couple of years, the transport industry itself is having a kind of boom, especially in expanding Sydney's west. Where do you feel like transport's heading in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think there's you are right. The explosion and the boom in the transport sector is pretty evident to see. I guess where it's going is it's probably best encapsulated. The New South Wales state government has a vision of a 30-minute city, so they want to turn Sydney into a place where you can get anywhere, or you can get to where you work, to where you shop and where where you play, where you do things for fun within 30 minutes. So that means, and that's across the entire of Greater Sydney. And that's starting to come to fruition through, the City Metro that I'm working on, the City and Southwest project. But there's 2 other City Metro projects currently underway, the Western Sydney Airport Metro and Metro West. And if you look at the Transport 2056 strategy, which is the government's sort of vision for what the transport sector in the state will look like by that year, they've got more metros in the pipeline, they've got fast rail in the pipeline, and it's got a long way to go. So I think it'll transform the way we live when it's all finished. But there's a long way to go between now and then, and a lot of opportunities.
Right. So moving forward from that, do you think the transport industry will continue to grow in the future? Like, is it a good sector to dive into students currently? Will it continue to grow and create opportunities?
Without a doubt, yeah. There's a big shortage of you hear people talk about skill shortages across the sector, across government, but there's a huge shortage of engineers, as well as skilled labourers and all manner of professionals. So in the transport space, there's definitely a lot of opportunities for students and for young professionals to get involved.
Great. Now, on the other hand, guys, you work as a principal civil engineer in urban development. Can you explain a little more about what urban development actually is and what regions or projects you have developed?
Yeah, I can sort of at least tell you how we do it. So we I lead the sort of the urban and place team here, which sits under the wider civil group. The way that we distinguish ourselves is saying that we kind of do the civil work that is not directly related with road or with rail. We have civil rail sub teams, and we have obviously the highways team that do major roads. We kind of do all the stuff that kind of sits in the middle, the smaller nodal stuff around stations, developments in brownfield, so in the city, and developments sort of out west. We do a fair bit of work doing stuff around the airport as well. So we're sort of that general civil skill set. We have we're not dedicated drainage engineers, we're not dedicated pavement engineers. We're the sort of the people that know a little bit about everything, and know that if it reaches a certain technical complexity, that we have a whole office of people that we can rely on to refine that. And that's kind of the space that we occupy. So we're those generalists that can jump in on major projects and minor projects, and as a result of that, a lot of our team ends up working on the major projects, either in a design management or a project management capacity, because they have enough technical ability and enough technical sort of understanding to quiz where design deliverables are going. But also that general understanding of, not being siloed into understanding only drainage, or being siloed into only understanding road geometry. And as a result, we end up operating in, most urban spaces in Sydney and in rural areas as well.
So you guys are kind of like a jack of all trades kind of people? Yeah.
What I tell people is nobody ever starts like that. We give most of our junior team, we tell them, focus on something, sort of. The thing that most people don't tell you is you really don't get an opportunity to focus solely on one particular discipline as you progress in your career. So take the benefit of somebody, being comprehensive with teaching you about something, build a skill set in that. In our team, you will get an opportunity to work at every part of the project if you want to. Just make sure you are rigorous in the thing that you're working on at the minute.
Right. And similar to the kind of question I asked Patrick, would you recommend this to people in the future? Will it continue to grow? And what are current job prospects like at the moment?
Look, the answer is exactly the same as Patrick's. I mean, it's in a very general sense, it's an excellent time to start being an engineer, to be an engineer general. That's just a fact. in terms of urban and whether that's for people, I like it because it gives you an opportunity to work across very many things. I mean, I get asked to, to contribute to road projects and major sewer plant projects, because you're always able to provide some level of input as a civil generalist. So it works for me because I like to, be involved in a lot of different things. There's plenty of people also that are specialists, technical specialists that want to diligently be the best, geotechnical engineer or drainage engineer. And for those people, we have a place. We'll keep you, but there's obviously a specialism there that you should seek out. So it's really, maybe the personality type that you are and how specific you want to get on a certain discipline.
Right. Yeah. All right. Now, moving on to Josh, I think you personally can give us some of the best insight because you're the most recent to graduate. So we can probably relate to you the most. What were your initial steps out of university and what surprised you most about entering and working in the industry?
So initially out of university, I'd started an undergraduate internship with a consultancy, just BG&E, and I worked with them from I think middle of third year all the way through fourth year, and then I just went straight as a graduate there, and I spent another 3 years with them. So I think, if you can get an internship and you get into a company and you enjoy working with those people, definitely stick with it. There's a lot of guys there that helped me a lot, and there's a lot of I think a good thing when you're young is to get early in your career, especially if you're in structures, is to try and be exposed to design and a little bit of site as well. Like try and get a good mix of both site work and design work. And then as you progress, like now I'm I'm like 4 years out now. I think now I'm sort of getting myself more into a more technical sort of role where I still go to site here and there, but I have less involvement with site and more early stages of a project, setting up, like lateral stability models, doing things like that. So yeah, it's probably how the few steps I've taken since I've left uni has put me here.
So biggest tip is probably grabbing that first internship just to get your hand in the door.
Yeah, definitely. And reach out, I'll probably set my CV to I don't know, fair few consultancies, and some you get replies, some you don't get replies. But yeah, it's definitely, I feel like it's definitely a industry where if you can form good connections at events like this, it's probably or when you guys do the industry nights and like the cocktails and all that sort of stuff, it's good to get yourself known. And because even now, when I moved to Arup, the reason I moved here was just because more or less was through my supervisor knew one of the guys at Arup, and then we ended up started talking that way. There was a link there rather than formally applying and all that sort of stuff.
Oh wow, yeah, that's pretty cool. So it was more of a formal.
It was less formal because my supervisor was based overseas, and then I got to go overseas with him for a little bit, and then I met the guy from Arup, and
oh wow,
that's how it sort of happened. So definitely take the time to make connections with industry.
Now, you also did a postgrad master's degree as well as GUICE. So I want to kind of dive into this. So graduating with a Master of Structural Engineering, and GUICE, you graduated with a Master of Engineering Management. How was your overall experience with postgrad, and would you recommend to other people? Is it for everyone?
I think postgrad is good because it does serve as a differentiator between people, and there are a lot of engineers there, and every bit of extra qualification, it's an on paper thing. On paper I have a master's, doesn't make me better than someone that doesn't have a master's or anything like that. But I think if anything, I've noticed, to me it shows commitment into your profession. I think that's the comment when I've had interviews with people and they've looked at my CV and they've seen a Master's of Engineering. They're like, okay, so clearly this person's someone that's committed to the profession. They're not just there and might if they get an offer in another industry, they'll take the first exit they can get. So I think that's probably what it's done more of. Look, would I recommend it? I don't think it's absolutely critical. Like, there are plenty of guys at both consultancies that I've worked at that are pretty high up and don't have master's degrees. But if it's something that interests you, I would say do it earlier rather than later, because I think if you've been out of uni for 3, 4, 5 years, it's probably harder to get the motivation to go back. Like, I just went straight from graduate to postgraduate. I didn't take any time off.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Guys, did you have anything to add on to that? How was your experience with postgrad?
Yeah, I'm probably the warning that Josh gave. So I did it a lot later. So I did about 4 or 5 years after. He's right. It is a lot harder to get the motivation to complete it. The reason I did it was my motivation was maybe a little bit different. I was doing a lot of project work at the time. And kind of just needed a valid excuse to leave the office at a normal time. And I thought, post working hours, uni would stop the questions on my way out of the office. It did. I got a lot out of it. It was very interesting. There was a lot of sort of it was a very academic approach to project management, which for the masters that I did particularly, and having at that time worked as a construction manager, having some design management experience under my belt, you have the technical experience to then see, oh yeah, that's right, that's what it looks like in a book, and you can improve your practice of it. I'd agree, though. I don't know necessarily that people in the industry necessarily regard folks, walking the design floor with a master's as any different or more qualified. In my opinion, your CV and your reputation demonstrates that far more than how many sort of certificates from universities you've got on the wall. At ACOM as well, there's a real drive for sort of chartership, and I think that I've seen that across the industry quite a lot. The chartership is certainly something that kind of has that reputational thing tied to it a lot more than maybe a master's does, and that's for a good reason, right? Like, a chartership is a demonstration of experience gained and success had, so it's it kind of does that reputational thing a lot more than maybe a master's done. That said, I mean, I think I would definitely do it again. I got a lot of academic learning out of it that at that time I found quite motivating.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So now I'm going to move on to the next question, which kind of involves you all. So it looks like all of you guys now have experience working overseas. So Patrick, you had experience working in the United Kingdom, and Gus, you had experience working in the Netherlands, and I just learned today that Josh had experience working overseas. So starting with you, Patrick. Yeah, so working overseas is something that always fascinates me, and I see it as a great experience, especially when you're young and working in a different environment with a unique culture and values. So how did the opportunity come across to work overseas? Were you actively seeking to work abroad, and did you apply, or did it just come about, sort of?
Yeah, so in short, yes, I was looking for an opportunity overseas. It's something that I had always wanted to do, to live and work overseas. I think it's a great life experience and gives you different perspectives. And like many comments that guys, Josh and myself have made, that came about through contacts from uni and industry who were working over there, and they didn't, I didn't get a job working in the companies that they were working with, but they were aware of the sort of opportunities that were sort of around in London, which is where I worked. So yeah, I was actively looking, but yeah, it was those networks that helped me sort of flesh out and understand where they actually were, and more, understand in more detail what the kind of work would be.
And how's your overall experience? Like, did you fit in, and do you feel like, would you recommend it to a lot of other people?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, the UK and Australia are relatively similar countries, so culturally, it's quite easy to fit in. There's a lot of Antipodeans, a lot of Australians and Kiwis in the UK and South Africans. I would definitely recommend it. There, despite how close historically the two countries are, there still are some interesting differences. And when I first went over there as a more junior engineer, the expectations of what engineers, UK engineers would do and what Australian engineers would do are quite different. I had a much I would say stronger and more rounded understanding of the contractual and commercial side of the design and construction process. And at the time, I was working for a construction contractor, whereas the UK engineers were expected and better at site surveying. So in Australia, most construction projects have surveying companies, have field surveyors or others that do the actual surveying work. But in the UK, that's all done by site engineers and from what they learn at uni. So that was an interesting difference, but not a major issue because there's plenty of people that could do what was needed. The different perspectives and seeing the different way that UK construction companies worked was interesting and had some great experience, which is now applicable back here. I worked on Crossrail, which is a huge, essentially a metro line as well, but under London, going from east to west. So it's a monstrous project. It's enormous, but had some pretty great experiences and got some good learnings from that project.
Right. And can I ask, were you intending to stay there, or did you always want to come back to Australia?
Yeah, well, funnily, I was enjoying my time in the UK and looking to stay over there a couple more years, and I got a role with a new company on a new project who had planned to, were planning to get a work visa, but for internal reasons, they had some miscommunications and their company didn't offer sponsorship. So that sort of one of the later questions I know you've asked is how things like how things in your career can change sort of direction. But I guess just on that is, I think being resilient is very important. So rather than having that as a negative, I set some boundaries with the company about what they needed me to do, because the role I was supposed to be there on that project was for a number of years. But for the work that I could do in the time I had left on my visa, it involved traveling to Ireland and to Austria to inspect offsite manufactured precast concrete and wall cassettes, and doing all kinds of interesting things, but really taking it as a positive of what I can do while I'm still there, and now it's it's a great experience that is beneficial for me in my career.
Right. Now, moving on to you guys, you worked in the Netherlands. That's a little different because not everyone there speaks English, from my understanding. So we
no.
No.
No,
I may be wrong.
Look, a lot of people do. Dutch are quite reasonable English speakers. I'm Dutch originally, so for me it wasn't too much of a challenge. I will say my thing was a little bit different. I was actually still on a student visa when I was in Australia, so my family came over. My old man used to work for an oil company, Shell. They left, and I was on a student visa when I finished uni, which meant that my visa in Australia actually expired by the time I graduated. I was due to start with a company called Vision Stream. They still exist. They're doing a lot of the NBN rollout as a primary contractor. They wouldn't, similar to Patrick, they wouldn't sponsor. I was basically just an undergrad, or actually a fresh-faced grad at the time, so they wouldn't sponsor me. So I had an option to either sort of spend a lot of money trying to stay in Australia, or pick up stamps and work in Holland. So I went and did that. Yeah, for me, it wasn't really an application. I mean, I got on a plane, I sort of landed. I applied for jobs when I was there. Holland's a funny place when you come from Australia, because a lot of the careers that we've been talking about, Patrick and Josh and what a lot of you folks will move into following graduation. In Holland, most people roll straight into a master's degree, so it's a 3-year grad, with a 2-year postgraduate degree after that. That's a 5-year engineering degree is generally how most Dutch people sort of leave uni there. So somebody with a 4-year bachelor's degree in Holland is kind of a weird middle ground. And I got the question, why didn't you finish your master's quite often? But it worked out for me. I had to kind of start from the bottom, if you will, and I was put on mostly, doing drafting and design for my own projects, and it really helped me sort of shape my ability as a generalist, sort of as an urban designer. We'd be responsible for the drainage and the utilities, and if the job was small enough, get creative about a landscape design, and really just know everything about the thing that you were putting on the plan, including needing to draft it in 2 different CAD packages if you needed to. So serendipitously, it actually really worked out for me, because it ended up showing me that with diligence and an understanding of all the things that go into an urban project, you can get quite far. So yeah, that's sort of my experience. My experience out there, it was quite positive, and it also meant that when I decided to come back to Australia after about 3 years, I had I was easily I could easily sort of move between different teams within the sort of engineering consulting realm.
Right. And I take it you would recommend this experience to other students as well?
Overwhelmingly, and I'm happy to be corrected by Josh or Patrick if they disagree, but I think the experience of moving overseas, working in a different culture is generally positive, challenging in some cases, but working through those challenges and becoming a well-rounded professional, I think all largely positive. It's there's a lot of people as well, and ACOM's a great example of this, of folks that do it the other way around. We have the whole floor full of folks from Scotland, folks from Ireland, folks from Spain. In the engineering business, more so than potentially maybe folks that work in law or things like that, it is a very transferable skill set. And we if it's something that interests you, then absolutely go for it, because it's great.
Mm-hmm. That was a good answer. So Josh, I just found out today that you worked overseas. How's your experience working overseas? Well, what country were you in?
I did a short stint in China.
Right.
So yeah, it was through my supervisor. He graduated from Tsinghua, which is a university over in Beijing. So when I did my thesis with him, he had some students or a professor over there that he was sort of working with, and then so our thesis kind of overlapped. So I got to go over there with him and just sort of present what we've had done in Sydney, and they presented what they had found and sort of wrote a small paper. And then eventually that paper was published. I think it was published, and it was presented at a engineering convention, I think last year. So that was pretty good. But while I was over there, I did get to meet a few people from from the Shanghai office in Arab, and then I got to work on a bit of their projects just as sort of like a student. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, it was interesting. I spent overall a whole month just in China, so that was good.
Yeah, and you'd recommend it as well too?
Yeah, like following on from what the others have said, yeah, it's definitely, I think engineering is one of those industries where it's very easy to sort of move overseas if that's what you want. Like I know where I work, and I'm sure ACOM would be pretty similar, because we got offices all over the world, so we do like long-term assignments or short-term assignments, and if you want to move to Spain and there's a guy in Spain that wants to move to Sydney, you sort of just swap. So it's really encouraged to do that. And I feel like it comes back to building that network as well. It's like, we talk about building a network here in Sydney with SUCE and all that, but it's also globally, like with things like LinkedIn now, it's so easy to build networks overseas. And, with such a big company, if you come across a problem that you haven't seen before with companies that have, tens, 20s of offices all over the world, someone somewhere is bound to have ran into that problem before. So yeah, it's good to be able to lean on others in such a big market.
Cool. So some great answers from all you guys. I think I'm done interrogating you guys about your life experiences though. Now more into like general types of questions. Starting off with you, Patrick. Did you have any setbacks or like real challenges within your career or even life that impacted you where you kind of are today? You kind of touched that a bit on that before, but like, did this make you more successful?
Yeah, I think it so, believing I was going to get a visa to get, a work visa to stay in the UK, and then being told that, the company couldn't do that is obviously not what I was expecting, but it just, I guess, helped me understand and develop, and see the importance of resiliency, because things don't always go right, and there's always challenges in every project you work on. So you have to be able to sort of, take what you can and learn what you can from bad situations, and then when you work on a good project, then know what to take forward to the next one. But yeah, I think resiliency in this day and age is very important, and with COVID having impacted the world so much, it's the need to be sort of versatile and adaptable is more important than ever. So I think it's helped me in the long term.
100%. So it's made you definitely, well, I assume, a lot more adaptable and resilient, right? Yeah,
without a doubt. Yeah.
So guys, did you have any major challenges or setbacks or anything that really kind of shaped your career, or even projects that went wrong that you can learn from?
Look, I don't think we have time to go through, all the things that go wrong and what the lessons are. Like, I think in a more general sense, if you're not, seeing challenges on a somewhat regular basis, you're probably, well, certainly my feeling is that I'm probably not growing as much as I'd like to. And often when it does get quite challenging, and it does, I mean, at the moment, with the amount of engineers that are around and the amount of work that's going, there's a lot of work and people are putting in a lot of time and a lot of hustle to try and get things done. But the thing that sort of, for me, I try to remember about that is, engineering fundamentally is about creating a new solution to a problem. Every single, for every single project that you do, you're not, ordering the same piece of IKEA furniture and assembling that. You're not, it's not a commodity that you're buying off a shelf. So fundamentally, there will always be a challenge, and with that, a setback. For everything that you do, the point is just to keep focused on the goal at the end, I suppose. So yeah, unfortunately, and I don't want to be negative, there will be a ton of setbacks, and just recognize that those are the things that that develop your experience. They're quite positive in that regard.
Right. So Josh, in your time in your career, have you experienced any major setbacks or challenges?
Yeah, so I actually got fired for my first internship at a consultancy. I say I got fired, but I essentially got fired. They asked me they didn't want to keep me on, and it mainly was because it's a complicated story, but I was basically asking. I was an undergrad, so I was actually only in second year, probably towards the end of second year, and I was asking too many questions about creep and shrinkage factors, which is probably a bit of a black box even now. And I had a bit of a disagreement with the engineer that was meant to be mentoring me, because he just gave me answers that weren't lining up with the code, and I kept questioning him, and I wasn't really liked, so they asked me to leave. So yeah, that was it turned into quite a big I was obviously pretty upset, and the senior had told me, like, go home and look at yourself in the mirror, like you're not cut out to be an engineer. And this is me in second year.
Wow.
So yeah, that was pretty I'm not going to name the consultancy or anything like that, but that was pretty yeah, I'll definitely never forget that. Like, I remember going home and just thinking like, oh, I've done the wrong degree, like I've already wasted 2 years. And I really enjoyed engineering. Like, I really liked the numbers, and I really liked looking into codes, and why codes are different depending on, if you look at American code, Australian code, Euro code. That was the thing I loved the most about engineering, is that number crunching, that sort of technical stuff. And that's something that not every engineer will enjoy. And if we all liked one thing, it'd be very difficult to get site engineers and all that stuff. But yeah, that definitely sort of rattled me a little bit. But I didn't. Yeah, you just take it. I guess I just sort of popped it on the chin, thought about it, and then yeah, you just move on. Like, I guess I was still very early in my career, so I didn't. It wasn't like caused a financial burden or anything like that on me. But yeah, still definitely rattled me, and I've never forgotten it till this day. I probably won't forget it either.
So, what have you learned from it? It's ask less questions, or
No, I still ask heaps of questions. I mean, if you're not asking questions, like, you're either an absolute genius or you don't know, you're not understanding anything that's being said. Because especially when you get into, like, I know I deal a lot with concrete. So for me, like, when we're talking about long-term defections, creep, shrinkage, those sorts of factors, it does become quite technical and quite confusing, and there's so much guidance out there and you don't know which one to follow. So no, I definitely wouldn't tell anyone to ask less questions. I think I still ask heaps of questions, but I think I just sort of learned how to take criticism, and just when you do get criticism, which parts to look at and which parts to keep with you, and other parts that should just be disregarded. But yeah.
All right, I think we have time for one last question before we move into the Q&A. So what's the thing you love most about what you do for work? Starting off with you, Patrick.
The best thing about it's probably the unique things that you learn on each job. So at the moment, I'm working on Sydney Metro, and the metro. So the part of the metro I'm working on is the conversion of the Bankstown line into an automated railway, which is what the metro is, and that's the term is brownfield rail. So it's currently a rail corridor, and it's converting the brownfield rail into an automated railway. But the number of historical and legacy issues that come up because it's not a greenfield site. It's not tunneling underground or in a farmer's paddock out in the middle of nowhere is incredible. Even a couple of weeks ago, so I'm a civil engineer, and speaking to one of the rail systems engineers. So that's looking at sort of the rail track and the overhead wiring and the dynamics of trains and how they move along a network. And he was explaining to me that there's about, I think he said 8 different methods to measure where something is on the network, on the Bankstown line. So you have a chainage you think is set, but on the Bankstown line in the middle of Sydney, there's 8 different ways that you'll be able to tell where an asset sits in that corridor, and they're not always aligned. And it's unbelievably interesting when it's explained. I didn't understand it at all when I first heard it, but having this rail systems, SME, subject matter expert, explain it to me, it was just fascinating, and allowed me to understand what I needed to do to resolve the particular issue I was faced with. But just those oddities that come up in working on different and unique projects, just it always keeps you on your toes, and it makes your work life interesting.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. You're always in an interesting kind of dynamic environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, what do you love most about your work?
Look, to be honest, it at the moment, I'm sort of getting to the position where the best thing is really working with the team. The team I'm with currently, and the sort of the projects that we run, the space we operate in, it's sort of really humming, and we've worked really hard to get to a point where that is. And it's a point of pride, but it's also really what excites me about coming in every morning. I'm really excited about questions and guidance that folks ask about, but then also, the trust that the organization has in, the lifting that we can do. And that's, for me, that's really exciting, that it's not just about how many hours I put into the day myself anymore, but just how much the team can really, work as a cohesive unit, or even as a crucial part of a whole that we might not be directly responsible for. And yeah, that's really exciting. It's really exciting to work in a sort of a high performing team like that.
Yeah, 100%. Josh, anything you love most about your work?
Yeah, so for me, I think the thing I like the most is when you see something that you've worked on for a year, 2 years, sort of come to that design stage and is actually being built on site. So like, I worked on key quarter tower in Circular Quay, and that was a pretty full-on project. There was a lot of technical trouble and problems that we ran into, and then finally like seeing it built and being there at those sort of milestones, like topping out building, installing spiral staircases. Definitely the scale of what you do sometimes is and seeing that in real life is crazy. Like even like with the metros, some of the tunnels that are being built, and like I was working on one of the stations in near town hall, and just being at the bottom of the tunnel, and like you're standing there in this huge tunnel, you just look for kilometers, like straight underneath the city, and you're thinking in 12 months time there's going to be a 40-story overstation development here. It's the magnitude and the scale of the work that we do. I think you work on a computer, like most of the day I'm on a computer, and you're drawing dimensions, and you're sizing up beams and concrete beam depths and column sizes. But when you actually see what a 1200 column looks like, it's really eye-opening.
I can only imagine, and just a feeling you get when you complete a project and just look at it. So I think it's time to move into the Q&A section if Andrew wants to run that. So guys, if you have any questions, leave it in the Slido, and Andrew will be sure to
For sure. Thank you, Anj, and thank you guys for sharing with us your experience. That was definitely really interesting. And for the questions, I hope you can see my screen. We'll dive right back into your career and experience. Now, you guys all work in different specialist areas of civil engineering. How and when did you come about finding your interest in these areas? Josh, do you want to maybe start us off?
Yeah, I think because I'm still quite early in my career, I probably haven't fallen into that yet. I mean, I think from my sort of friends that are all in structural, I think the first 1 to like 5 years is sort of them, they might try structural, they might try civil, and this comes into the company you work at. Like working in a multidiscipline engineering company, you have those options. Like if you went into a company that was just structural or just civil, you're somewhat limited. But yeah, I know myself that I want to get in more, go down that technical route. But I think for some people, they've been, like one of my older friends that I've got, they spent 10 years doing design, and then they went to site, and now they're on site and construction engineers. So I think it's a hard one. Like I don't think there's a real definitive answer unless you're set on wanting to do something, like that's what you want to do. But if not, it doesn't matter. There's plenty of time, I think.
Patrick, did you want anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think as Josh said, if there's something you're absolutely set on doing, then you need to work at that and make it happen. But I think for me, and possibly for a lot of people, I wasn't exactly sure what specialty or area I wanted to head into, but rather than trying to sort of manufacture something that didn't exist, early on in my career, you've just got to be open to any opportunity. So my first project I worked on site, someone asked me if I wanted to look after the piling contractor that we had coming to site in 2 weeks, and I had learned very little about the construction of piles at uni, but I said yes, and for the next couple of years of my career, I did a lot of that led me into sort of heavy civils and foundations, so piling and structural works, earthworks, and then that sort of itself then morphed into sort of linear transport and then rail specialty. But that again came about through grad rotations at my first company I worked at, and so just being open to the different opportunities that might present themselves, and then seeing what you enjoy is important. And yeah, you know, my experience, I very much enjoy and knowledgeable about you know, foundations and how the civil aspects of projects influence, you know, rail construction and station construction. So yeah, I just say be open to different opportunities.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. Guys, how about you?
Yeah, I might just sort of mirror what Patrick was saying, and maybe folks want to consider or reconsider maybe how that question is asked. In my experience, and we tell the folks on the floor here the same thing, your specialist area of interest will generally find you, as long as you put yourself in a position to have varying experience and fully commit to those experiences to understand, you know, what makes certain disciplines tick. You'll figure out what keeps you thinking about things for 4 days on end without being able to focus on anything else. That'll be the area of interest, you know, that'll be the thing that makes you tick. So yeah, don't try to force and find something and I need to be, you know, a dedicated pavement engineer. You'll find it when you do it, because you will literally not be able to think about anything else.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you. So the next question I have is for Josh. Now, Josh, I recall you mentioning that you did your master's straight out of your undergrad. Did you feel like you missed out on opportunities because people could consider you overqualified for some of them?
No, I don't think so, because I was already sort of working. I was working full time and studying part time. So my master's was done over 2 years. So I don't think I've sort of been overqualified I haven't been told I'm overqualified for anything. So yeah, no, I don't think my master's led me to think that at all.
Cool, that is good to hear. And going deeper into the field of opportunities, all of you guys worked overseas, and do you think being a foreigner and working at an overseas company kind of limits your potential at the company? Does anyone want to take this?
Look, from my experience, it doesn't. It didn't when I went to the Netherlands. It certainly doesn't here. Diversity is a positive thing. Different points of view, different whether they be educational or professional backgrounds, they contribute to better performance on the jobs as a whole. And to be honest, the way that most projects get delivered these days, certainly large complex jobs, you don't get away from a bunch of people with different cultural backgrounds all needing to band together to work, because otherwise the thing just doesn't get built. So yeah, I've certainly not seen that be a detriment. There's always cultural differences that need to be worked through, but that's on both sides of the equation.
Great answer, thank you. And because we are running short on time, maybe we'll just quickly fire through 1 or 2 more questions. How important is it to have a high WAM, would you think, in your experience?
For me, or in my view, it's your WAM is important at the start of your career. So to get an interview and to get your foot in the door, particularly if you don't have, particularly for very large companies, or if you don't have contacts within a company, then you'll go through a big recruitment process, and it is one of the things that the company will look at. But that said, it's about having people who are have diverse experience and have different views. So showing that you're involved in different things that are relevant to the industry, if that's being part of Engineers Australia, or if that's be involved in an organisation like SUCE. All those things build up for a company to form a picture of someone on paper, and then once you've got your foot in the door, in my opinion, your WAM is not that important. It's very much about how you present, how you engage with people, and so those soft skills. But so it's important at the start.
Yeah, definitely. That is a great answer. And I loved how you said that soft skills are also important, because that directly links to the next question. What would you guys say is the most valuable soft or technical skill that has contributed the most to your career progression? Guys, would you like to start this off?
Yeah, look, for me personally, I think it's probably been drive. I'm glad nobody really, when I started my career in Holland, nobody asked about my WAM, because that would have been a very short conversation. But I was fortunate, I suppose, that once I got involved in working, I found that if I'd applied myself and worked quite hard at upskilling in certain tasks, that contributed to my understanding, quite quickly. So the thing that and we tell people on the floor here as well, work ethic and a desire to understand, to push yourself to try and understand things. We can't teach you that. We can teach you almost everything, but your approach to wanting to solve problems and have a drive to do so is the most crucial thing that we select for folks that join the team, because you can't teach that kind of ethic.
Yeah, definitely. Great answer. And for Josh and Patrick, because we're running out of time, if you had to say one soft or technical skill that has contributed the most to your career progression, what would it be? And it's a very hard question, but if you had to pick one.
I think enthusiasm, similar to what was said. Being enthusiastic about the work you're doing and having a passion for it differentiates you from a lot of people, I think.
And I guess for me, I think it's very important, to develop the relationships with, the people you work with. If that's, gaining the trust of a client that you're working with by being, honest and upfront when there's challenges, and working with different people within your organization or your project to understand what they need and what makes them tick, and then so they understand what you need from them, and finding a solution that works for everyone.
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you so much for answering the questions. I'll pass it back to Ansh now.
Hey guys, so I think it's time to wrap up. First, I'd like to give a huge thank you to you guys, Joshua and Patrick, for giving your time to attend today's panel. We really appreciate you for all the insights and opportunity you've given us to dive deeper in the industry. And it all started with a little message on LinkedIn. Well, I just really appreciate your coming here. Do you mind if we take a quick picture together, or just take a screenshot while we're all here?
Sure thing.
Sweet. So for our SUCE members, don't forget about our upcoming events. Next Wednesday on the 6th of April, we have our last installment of the academic series, where we host Professor Anna Paradevska for her seminar materials. And we also have our trivia night next Friday, the 8th of April. So come along for a fun-filled and stress-free night of human interaction. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Olivia, you can end it whenever you feel free.
Oh, wait, sorry. I thought you had the
No, your
host
host.
yourself. All right. Bye.